Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Wonderful. How about you?
I'm good. Questions. 150 people registered, so it's very exciting.
All right.
Yeah.
That is
All right.
exciting.
Get my screen shared. John, can you see the slides?
Yep. Just came up.
Cool. And then I'm actually just, well, since I have you, thanks for being on, can you just let me know that you, can you see video?
I can. I can. And do you know about when you go to share the video, there's on Zoom, there's two little boxes at the bottom left that you got to check? You already know about
Learned
those.
that yesterday.
Yeah, I tried it without that. It doesn't work. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to hit play. I want to make sure you can hear it.
Okay, cool.
Welcome to the Celebrating Families webinar.
Perfect.
Thank you for
Awesome,
joining
thank
us.
you.
I-
Oh yeah, Rosemary and I were on the phone for longer than you'd want to know yesterday, and I knew that, I had learned that, and yet.
Yeah, it's one of those. They're so small, and it's so critical that you hit those. Yeah, we were buying new computers and practically trying to figure that out until we found those little check boxes. It sure helps.
It does. All right, I'm going to open it up so I can let people in. And
Nikki's here with me now.
hi, Nikki.
Hi.
I have my personalized waiting room because of you. I love it.
Right on.
Hello, everybody. Good morning as you're coming on. Good morning, good morning. Can I have someone just raise their hand from the attendee list so I can see that you? Thank you, Mary. Oh, thanks, Stacy. Helps to see that you all can hear me.
We're not on video.
You'll be on video, John and Nikki, when you talk.
Oh.
If you want to be, only if you. No pressure.
Probably not.
Okay, all good.
Yeah.
There'll be a slide with your names. That's
Okay. Cool.
Good morning, everyone. As you're joining us, if on the bottom of your screen you see a chat box or a Q&A, we'd love for you to click on that chat box. Hey, Sasha and Karen, and add a check-in word that lets us know how you're doing today. It's a great way to have a time-efficient check-in. Oh, Karen, I'm glad you're refreshed. We're doing good. So we have about 150 people registered for today across the country. So thanks for being here early, and we will wait till 10 a.m. to get started. I'm excited too, Sasha. That's why I'm standing, not sitting today. My flip chart.
Do you care if I take my mask off?
Good morning, everyone. Welcome as you're joining us. We'd love for you to click on the chat button and leave a word letting us know how you're doing today. And glad to hear you're doing awesome. Can you hear music?
Yep.
Cool. In true celebrating fashion, festivities fashion. Hi, Melissa Armstrong. It's so great to see names of people that I've been to your community to train with you. The options may look a little different because you're on a webinar and many of us are used to Zoom meetings. Everyone starts out as muted and then we will mute you when we unmute you as we get to questions. Okay, well, let's get started. I'm seeing that some of you can't hear me. Could someone let me know that you can? And then if you, anyone that can't, oh, thank you for raising hands. And if you can't, you may want to check on your volume on your computer. Thanks for raising hands. And hear me. Okay. Hi, Antoinette. Nakoa. Well, this is such an exciting morning. I'm thrilled to have you here. My name is Melissa Santos, and I am a senior director at Community Solutions, and am right now overseeing the California Expansion Grant for Celebrating Families that's being funded by the California Office of Child Abuse Prevention. I've been involved with Celebrating Families for almost 16 years as a national trainer, program developer, and consultant. And we've been hard at work knowing that you guys are ready to get this to your families. Some of you have already started in this time of our virtual work. So I want to thank you all for being here and taking the time. As I mentioned to Sun, one, I'm standing up because I have so much excitement. I can see your names, and which brings just the energy of feelings of the passion and the commitment to supporting families impacted by addiction that you've shared with me, as I've seen so many of you throughout the country. So we've got Oklahoma, and we've got Sacramento and LA and Willits, and we've got Mary Beth over in Maryland. We've got the country covered, and just want to thank you all for being here. I want to just let you know that you can certainly be putting some Q&A. We have Rosemary's having a hard time with getting on right now. She was my co-facilitator, but I'll check back to the Q&A when we get to the end, but want to make the most of our time. So here's our agenda for today in our 90 minutes together. Welcome. We're going to do a little logistics around webinar. Looks like a lot of you have done this before because you're chatting and raising hands, but some of you may not have done it before. So want to make sure we get you comfortable with the Zoom platform. And then, of course, we'll do centering. We then have a couple of our sites who have successfully transitioned over to virtual quite quickly. So they already have some lessons learned, and how to set both yourselves up as an organization and your group leaders and your families up for success in implementing Celebrating Families on a virtual platform. We'll then go into best practices and strategies for implementation. We actually have put together a guide for you that we're really excited about. It's been informed by many of you based on what you're already doing, and our development team, it's hot off the press. You'll all be getting it sent to you after the webinar today. And then my goal is to keep a good chunk of time for questions and next steps, because I am sure once we talk about all these things, it's not going to cover everything and that you may have questions. So we want to keep time for that. And two of our panelists are going to stay on so that they can help me with questions as well, since they've been the ones to actually implement. So welcome, logistics, centering. Please keep your microphone muted. A few of you noticed that you were muted. You're muted. That I muted you unless you're talking, and we're going to keep it that way. And just again, to make the most use of time, because there's so many of us, and I know for me today, no dogs and kids, but that can be happening in the background as we're all working from home. I'm going to ask that if you'd like to share once we get to the Q&A, that you raise your hand so that we can know that you want to share. And then we encourage you to use the chat section and the Q&A when you have questions or comments, because if we can quickly answer them, we will. And at the end, once we've opened it up for questions, if we don't get to your question, we'll make sure that we pull from there if we have time. We don't have time, at least we know we'll have questions that we can follow up on with you. So we're excited to share with you what we have. I'm just going to take 1 second for I'm going to look for Tom Tish. Thomas Tish, there you are, and I'm going to make you a panelist. Okay, Rosemary and Tom, you should be good to go. Okay, let's get ourselves centered. So I'm going to ask that wherever you are, that you find a comfortable seat, that your feet are grounded into the floor beneath you. If you're comfortable, you can close or lower your eyes. And if not, just soften your gaze on a pleasant point in the room that you're in. Lower your hands and relax your shoulders. And take a deep breath in through your nose. Slowly release out of your mouth. Another deep breath in. And a slow release. As you continue to breathe slowly, scan down our bodies, relaxing your forehead and eyebrows, softening your jaw, lowering your shoulders, relaxing your hands, relaxing your back, relaxing your tailbone into the seat or ground beneath you, relaxing your legs and feet. Taking in the energy of passion and love and caring and well-being that comes from this community of Celebrating Families providers. That we can take in this energy from one another and continue to spread it out to our communities, to our nation, and to the world. These feelings of love and peace and comfort, of recovery and of hope. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you. Okay. So hello and welcome to the founder and co-author of Celebrating Families. Rosemary has actually pre-recorded a message for all of you, and I'm going to play that now. Welcome to Celebrating Families.
Not hearing the video.
Okay. Now?
Nothing yet.
Family. And
Yes.
Okay.
welcome to the Celebrating Families webinar. Thank you for joining us. I know these last 4 months have been hard for everyone because it's been hard on my family and the people that we are working with. We've been facing problems and challenges in our families, in our workplaces, trying to do work differently, working with small children at home while we're trying to do work, when our childcare is not available, and we're all in fear of almost an unknown disease that's sitting out there. We don't know when we get it. We don't know even if we have it for a while, and then we might even infect some of our loved ones. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and listening to what we have learned as we have talked to some of the people that have jumped on to putting Celebrating Families online virtually for families, because our families need this service more now than ever. Just a brief introduction. I am Rosemary Tish. I am the lead developer and co-author on Celebrating Families. I have always worked in teams, and our first team when we developed the program included a grandmother in recovery, myself a mother in recovery, an adult child of an alcoholic whose father committed suicide while she was a child, and we had our wonderful co-author Linda Sibley, who is not been affected by this disease, and challenged us to think through how to talk about it so that everyone could understand it. Because some of the things we assumed, some of the things we said, some of the terms we used, she did not understand, and she would ask us over and over and over again to try to explain, particularly the family role play that you probably have dealt with yourselves. Just a little bit of why I did this program is that almost to the date right now, I went into treatment 38 years ago. My children were 4 and 8 at the time. And I learned while there, and while they were talking about the family disease, that it was likely, and the statistic has changed a little, but at the time we said 50% of the children of alcoholics would become alcoholic. That meant that one of my daughters would likely have this disease just like I did, like my grandfather who died on the streets of LA did, like my brother who lived on the streets of LA for a period of time but has now gotten into recovery, and myself. I've learned since how deep this family disease goes. And my father's family, that's the grandfather that died, there were 10 living brothers and sisters, where they lost 2 in childhood. Out of the 10, 8 I know were alcoholic or addicted. One aunt talks about the fact that, well, she knows she's not supposed to say Uncle John was an alcoholic, but gee, he always had a 6-pack of beer between the gas station that they owned and getting home. And maybe that isn't normal. So we all suffered from it. Aunts that were using drugs, prescription drugs, weren't they okay? Maybe abusing them, maybe using a few too many. But we all had it. And then the cousins, their children, my cousins, were loaded with it. I know only 2 of probably out of 20 or so cousins, I'm not even sure how many I have, that did not inherit the disease. I know of 3 of us that are in recovery. I know of cousins who have died on the streets. I know people that are in the jails. I know of murder and suicide, all in the family. And that's what this is about. This is breaking that cycle in those families. In my family, maybe in your family, and certainly in the families we're working with. It is our deep belief that the parents love their children. Not all of us, when we're in the disease, any disease, can we show our love. Fairly recently, some of you may know I suffered from cancer last year. And the good news is I'm in recovery from that. It's in remission. But the other part of that is when I was in the hospital, I couldn't show my love and I couldn't take care of my kids. But now, when I'm in recovery and in remission, I can come back to trying to use some of the skills I have learned. And let me assure you, the skills that we are teaching and celebrating families, I have used with my own family. And what I can tell you is at this point, my 2 daughters neither have become addicted. And I now have 4 granddaughters who are 2.5 through 13. And of course, we start the whole process over again of worrying and trying to learn and take care of. I really want to share with you at the end of this little introduction my gratitude and knowledge that one person can make a difference. I have read recently a couple of books about the huge difference that one person made in history of the world, Churchill being one of them during World War II. And I believe that with Celebrating Families, you, the people that are providing these groups, are making a difference for the families you're serving. It may be one family at a time, but one family leads to another and it spreads. And if you're working with the parents, it's going to go back to the grandparents and the parents, brothers and sisters, the aunts and uncles and the cousins like I talked about. So thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. As questions come up, be sure to ask them. Be sure to stay connected with us. We need to know what works and doesn't work. And we appreciate you being part of the Celebrating Families team. Thank you.
So appreciative to Rosemary for that message, for her continued commitment to this work, and to all of us and the families. I am seeing that some of you have folks that are trying to get in. I not aware that we had a limit to the number of people. We have over 100 people already. I can't see, and I don't know, John, if you know, that I can go and do anything about that now.
I don't believe you can do it during
I don't think so. So what I can tell you is that we're recording this and we're going to make it available immediately after. So hopefully that that will be helpful. And I apologize that that some are experiencing that. So we're going to move on to setting up for success. Before I do, I just want to say that I got goosebumps. And I believe me, in practicing the video, I've listened to that video many times in getting this prepared. But the fact that, and this has happened so many times over the 15 years I've been part of Celebrating Families, that this work, this important work, and work that's so different than we've ever thought we would be doing virtually, is almost the day of Rosemary's sobriety birthday, 38 years ago. And it's that part of her heart and that part of commitment that drew me and gave me the same goosebumps when I attended my first training. So thank you again, Rosemary, for that and for being here today. We have with us John Durbin and Nikki Nelson. And then Maria, do we have you? Maria will be joining us. She's actually doing another training and is going to hop over. John and Nikki are from Bridges in Sacramento. They are a behavioral health organization, and within their STARS program have been doing Celebrating Families for many years. And they have had to they were a few weeks in, I think, John, right? And suddenly COVID hit and they had to transition over to virtual platform. And same with Maria. Uplift was one of our original pilot sites, and they run several groups, several cycles within a week. And so they've had lots of lessons learned and very much helped to inform today's webinar. So we've prepared some questions to keep us on track that I think will be helpful. Certainly were helpful when we talked to you. So the first is for John and Nikki. Can you tell us, how did you support families in making the transition to a virtual platform for groups? Because it's a huge shift.
Thank you, Melissa. And we are also eternally grateful for Rosemary and you for helping provide this wonderful program. So the first thing we did to help support the parents in the transition was we called them personally and invited them to what we thought of as a practice session. We called it a welcome back session, but it was a session where we had a chance to have them work out all of the technical glitches and all that sort of thing and get them online. And what we found when we did that, this was earlier in COVID, but what we found when we did that was that these people right now, and especially, really needed to talk. And so we got them on and started talking about Celebrating Families, and then gave them the suggestion to talk about, how are you helping your family get through these times from a positive perspective? What are you doing that's working? And they got to share that with each other. And then when we got through that, then we introduced them to the first session that we were going to have, which was the next week, using the same exact link so that we're able to really help them transition. We also decided to, I know different people use different platforms, but we decided to have people required to be registered. And one of the reasons why we did that was because you can answer questions like, are you going to be in a safe, confidential place when you're transmitting on this call? And is there going to be anybody else in the room that might need to be on the release of information that we want to add, or that we want to sign up for Celebrating Families? And that we had that information before the group actually started. And that was also very helpful. One of the other things we did to support people, because we knew that many of the families that we're dealing with had very limited access to technology, was that we offset the parent group from the children's groups. And the first week, I staggered the start times of the children's groups. The children's group started at 12:30, the preteens at 1, and then the teens at 1:30. And what that allowed me to do, because not all of our instructors were Zoom experts, was that I was able to go from room to room with them and make sure that we got everything on board and got them up and running. And what we found out was that the children that did make it onto those groups really opened up, and that was just amazing that we were able to do that. And what we found was that many of our clients were already using platforms of many different types, and so they were pretty amenable to that. One other suggestion that I have is if you're using a platform and you have larger parent groups, if you have a platform that has breakout rooms available, we really found that for those people that were kind of shy and didn't share as much in the larger parent group, really opened up in those breakout rooms when they were given a clear mission to be able to talk about something specific in those breakout rooms, and that was really very effective.
Thanks so much, John. Yeah, I think you and I are sharing in our Zoom geekness. But we wanted to be careful not to assume that everyone is using Zoom, but certainly we know for sure that on that platform, those breakout groups are really helpful and really easy to help with smaller groups and help with group discussion and to break up that gallery view and that we have in Zoom. However, your IT department and agency, I'm sure, have decided on a virtual platform that works for you. But certainly Zoom is a really great option. I also love, John, that you guys used the registration platform. So similar to how you all registered for today's webinar, although it's a meeting, you're able to customize questions. So John and his team are still doing the in-person intakes or intakes by phone, but those additional questions I really think help to I love how they can really help to set up that webinar. Now, of course, you can still do those questions as part of your intake, which leads me to my next question, because setting people up and setting expectations and agreements kind of happen before group. It's not just our group agreements, because we're really relying on families to have themselves ready for group. So the second question for you all at Bridges is, what needs to be different about facilitator preparation, eliciting participation from your group participants, and the group agreements?
Well, first, I want to start off by saying that I am also a trainer, so I do a lot of presenting, and I really recommend any of the facilitators to practice facilitating to a room like this virtually, because it's a very different feel when you're not getting that feedback and the body language and the nods of the heads and all that kind of thing that we normally get in that personal in-person classroom. And it really makes a difference as far as my teaching style. And so I had to really practice that and get used to using a lot of hand gestures and modulating my voice and that kind of thing to keep people's attention. So that was really a big part.
Yeah.
And then Nikki's got some comments.
Hi, Melissa. Good morning.
Hi, Nikki.
I just want to as well thank you and Rosemary for providing us this opportunity today to kind of chat with everybody and just kind of see what everybody else is doing. To answer that first question, one of the biggest things as far as preparing your clients for the virtual classroom is that, of course you have your group agreements, and one of the fun things is that we always liked about coming up with the group agreements is that we allow feedback from our parents to kind of guide us with those. But with the virtual piece, I believe it's really important that we express to them that yes, we are doing virtual. Yes, you are possibly in the comfort of your own home, but let's be mindful that this is still a group. And so there's no smoking, right? Like we can't have you smoking that cigarette, or, making sure that you're fully dressed. Like we can't, if it's hot outside and, we can't have you shirtless sitting on there, and to just be mindful of those kind of things. And those, again, are things that we have learned through experience, because they're kind of things that you don't really think about. I mean, we assume that everybody's going to be dressed, but,
Until they're not.
Right, but clearly we have experienced that. So that's a really important piece in just preparing our parents as we are stepping into the virtual classroom. And in regards to preparing with your co-facilitator, I always like to So when it's person to person, it's very easy, like I believe John had mentioned, for us to kind of feed off of one's energy and just kind of knowing when one is ending and the other one begins to pick up. Well, as you are virtual, it's kind of different. And so always preparing before you go on to the virtual classroom and maybe cueing with the co-facilitator. So if me and John are facilitating, as I am ending maybe my piece, kind of doing the entryway of, John, would you like to add anything? And then that's his cue for him kind of to go into whatever it is he's about to step into. That's very helpful. And just making sure that you guys, when you're checking in with one another and preparing, knowing when, you know, okay, you're going to do activity 1, I'll step into activity 2, and just those cue words as for the transition into the next activity. Also, one of the things that I have found has been very helpful for engaging the parents, because it is a little different being virtual as is to being in person. A lot of open-ended questions that seems to engage your parents as a little bit more so than when they are in person. If I'm asking you an open-ended question and allowing you to engage, it's not a yes or no response. Like you have to engage with me. You have to give me something, and in that, it will usually trigger another participant. Another parent will go, oh yeah, and so they are able to kind of engage as well. And then you have this full conversation that is taking place, and before you know it, you've got the whole screen who is just engaging and raising hands. And you know, of course, you'll have those parents that they like to participate the most, and so again, you have to kind of monitor that as well, because again, you've got parents that will take over that whole group, and you know, and you want to allow for everybody to get to engage. And if you have a quiet one, I always like to be specific and ask them for feedback. And I don't do it in a way to where I am spotlighting that parent. I might ask a couple, like I might be specific, like, John, what do you think about this? Susie, what do you think about this? And then I will ask possibly the quiet parent, Johnny, what do you think about this? So that they don't feel like that spotlight is, you know, getting shown on them, but at the same time, I'm engaging other participants as well. And that has been very, very successful.
Excellent. I really appreciate the both of you. And I saw it up from David said earlier, they're on group 3. They've had 99% attendance. Are you all finding the same, that you're having really good attendance virtually?
We're finding that that took, in the beginning, there was a little hit and miss, but then once we've got kind of the core that was going to be attending, we have a very high attendance record. I think that when you eliminate a lot of the transportation issues that many of our folks were running into, I don't know about other sites, but that's a big thing for them. When we eliminated that, the attendance actually went up significantly, the attendance percentage.
And Sandra, it was your group. You were logged on as David. That's okay. We'll give him the credit. Thanks, John. Yeah, and Maria is running another training, and I don't see that she's with us, but I'll answer her questions because I know them.
I'm actually here.
Oh, hi, Maria.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Maria from Uplift Family Services also has been with our Celebrating Families family for nearly, I think, a decade, and has been key to the translation of Celebrando Familias. And so thanks for joining us, Maria. I'm going to get right to your question because you've got to get back to your other training that you're facilitating. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us, how did you use handouts and homework to engage children and encourage family time, since we're doing this virtually?
Okay, so the handouts, what I did with some of the handouts here and there, kind of sprinkled throughout the curriculum as I've been going through the sessions, is that I have added some content to the handouts, because adding the content allowed for me to gauge during group whether or not I was going to have the entire time to go through the handout and explain everything. So it gave me a little bit of a buffer, if you will, so that if I, for example, ant warfare, we talk about it quickly in group if I'm running out of time, and then I say review your handout because it has all the information on there as well. So it helps me to make sure that the information is still given to the families and they could refer back to that handout. And then sometimes I'll also put some of the questions from whatever the handout was onto their parent self-assessment. So it also checks with them that, okay, they reviewed it and I know they did because they answered the questions on their parent self-assessment. So that's how I've been able to work with the handouts. And it, again, it provides me that buffer because some of us may run out of time. So that's how I've been able to do that. So just some slight changes on the handouts with more content just in case I need it. And then as far as engaging the children, I've done a couple different things. One of them is that the family time, what I've done is I have created that as part of their homework. So rather than having them in the room where we're all participating in family time, I have transferred that over as homework where it makes sense and where it's appropriate. And then they do that activity at home with the kids. And in the next week's parent self-assessment, there's a follow-up question to their homework, or sometimes there's 2 or 3 questions about, you know, did you guys look up the song? Like, for example, what's coming to mind for me right now is the Singing My Body song. I send them the link. They do the song together with their kids using the lyrics, and then they come back and they report back, hey, were you able to use the link to listen to the song? Did you do it with your kids? What conversation did that help you have with your children around their body being theirs and being able to set boundaries? And so that's kind of, I've turned that into sort of that homework time, and that's how we engage them. I've also kept families that have kids in the home. I've given them the option of staying on the screen and having them come to the screen, and I'll use a puppet to do a book. And so the kids come to the screen with the parents, and I've done a book for the last, like, I'll use 15 minutes of their time. We do the book, and then we'll end the session at that point. And then the other parents also have the option of, you could stay on, and some of them have, or you can leave the group because the group time is over. This is just an extended version. And so the book obviously will tie into the night's theme. And then, yeah, so that's what I've done to make sure that that all works well.
Awesome. And look, I see questions are rolling in, and we're going to do some of it in our Q&A, and some of it I'll summarize once, and we'll get into as we move forward in slides, because all those are really good questions that we've gotten a lot of great feedback around. Maria, I know a big question, even I'm curious about, is now that you've led several virtual groups, and I know you've tried several different things, we got role plays, and those role plays are so impactful. How is it going facilitating those role plays virtually?
Yeah, so thanks for asking that question, because I was in that same place that you are, like, how am I going to do this? And really the truth is it was trial and error. So my first round, and of course I'm still trying to get used to the technology version myself. So the first round I thought, well, the most important thing is making sure that they understand the rules and the roles. So I kind of try to dig as deep as I can without doing the role play. And so we did, we covered rules and roles, we talked about them. But after the class, I just felt like, if you're facilitating that role play, and at the end of that night, you just feel so good about it because you know that it was impactful for the families, and they walked away really reflecting on their own experiences and thinking about the roles. And so I didn't feel comfortable that they got what the entire meaning of it, right? They got some content, but didn't get to really feel it. So then I thought, okay, the next session, I'm going to just describe the whole story to them. So I'm going to feed it to them in a story version. And that worked out. It was a little more like, I felt like they got it a little bit more. They were, you know, really kind of trying to listen in and understand my whole story. So it kept them somewhat engaged, but I still didn't walk away with that feeling. So the next time I did it, I actually called them ahead of time and I said, I'm going to give you a role and I'm going to ask you first if you're comfortable with this. And I checked in and I assigned roles so they knew some of what their role was, right? For example, you're going to be an adult who then develops a problem with addiction. And, you know, I go into that. And then for the kids, I just told them, you know, I want you to be in this role of this 12-year-old and you're just going to be a 12-year-old. So I want you to think of things maybe a 12-year-old would say or do or think about if you're in this position. And when we did it that way, it was really neat because one, it kept them engaged the entire time because they had to be waiting for their turn to be called and to come in. And they were calling each other and they were trying to talk to each other on the screen. And I was able also to prompt them with the questions that I would have otherwise done in the actual room with them when we were, you know, pre-pandemic. And so I was able to prompt with all those questions that brought up really good discussions in the group. And that night I walked away feeling like, okay, they got it. Yeah. So that's what I did. And so the assignment beforehand with some information and then just making your best attempt at making it look as much as you can as if they were in the room with you.
I love it, Maria. And you're right. I think all of us that have done those role plays, it's that feeling more just as much as the knowledge, right? Which is so much about what Celebrating Families is and the way that we share information and build skills. And so I love that. And I love that you tried all different ways. I also love, it's no surprise to me that you're getting those families to sing the My Body song because you love that song. So I love it. And we'll talk about, and I'm going to be sharing more of what you've been doing, but I want to thank you for your time, Maria. I know you got to jam back, but we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Okay. Lots of good questions coming and you can keep them coming. So what we've got for you, and I'm going to address some of those as we go along. The developers have been hard at work. No, I don't know if they've been hot, but it's hot off the press. So there is a guide for recommendations for providing virtual Celebrating Families groups that will be sent to all of you. It'll also be posted on our PPI website. It'll be available. It's wherever we can be getting it, and we'll be sending that to you. And what it includes are guiding principles. We've actually added a section on what we believe about children. I'm not going to go over that today, but what's really important to us always, whenever we develop anything, is that we start with why we're doing it, and we start with what we believe in. And so as we went virtual, it was important for us to remember that all parents love their children and families want to do well. And so that remains the essence of what we're doing. There are technology tips that are also in there. There's a whole page actually, and I love that stuff and I love the Zoom stuff, but we really wanted today to be focused on information that you could only get for us. The technology stuff, as John and Nikki said, practice with one another. Log on. You can record yourself. That's what I do. You can record yourself and just play it back for yourself. So you can make sure that there's not too much light in the background, or that you're speaking well enough, or that the video works. And you can Google, no matter what platform you're using, you can Google tutorials to learn about the various platforms, or there's likely people on your team that know it well and you can check with them. What we're going to focus on today are strategies for providing the groups virtually. You heard some of those from John, Nikki, and Maria. Also, recommended session agendas. So I saw some questions come through around how do you get everybody apart and bring everybody together? It looks, well, there go our agreements. It looks really different. And maybe you'll try something and let us know, but we'll let you know that it looks different than that, and sites are doing it differently. But we'll go through those agendas. And then our developers have created a really nice matrix for every single week, for every single age group, not 0 to 3 yet, but we're working on it, to show you how in that shortened time frame, because we're not going to have people on Zoom for 3 hours, in that shortened time frame, what are the most important activities and where should you focus? What would you give for homework? So we're going to go over that, and it's all in this handy dandy guide that you're going to be able to print out for you and your teams that will guide you. And what it's referencing are all of the activities that are in the curriculum. Look how much smaller that is. And they're 5 volumes. We're growing. Okay. We want to remind you and remind ourselves that this is a family program. And so we have some sites such as Uplift that are doing the parent group, and the family activities are homework. But you saw that Maria is still working hard to engage children. We have Bridges that share, John and Nikki that shared, their groups are on Saturdays. And so they're still doing the teen group, the kid group, and the parent group, but they're doing them at different times. I know my friends up in Sherwood on their reservation have really kept those teens engaged. And I can't wait in the Q&A for you to share with us the virtual family dinner that you're doing tonight. And so what we know that everyone has a different amount of resource. Families have a different amount of resource. We want you to feel comfortable pulling anything that you can out of the curriculum to give to families, as close to fidelity as possible. And the only reason we know we want that is because we know that's what gets the outcomes, and the outcomes are what help heal families. And so the activities we show are based on that most important concept and that most important activity. But if something else from the curriculum feels like it would meet the needs of your group that night, do it. But want to just make sure that we're not forgetting families. Also, and I see hands raising, and I'm going to ask you to either plop it in chat or Q&A, and I'll get to you when we open up for question and answer. Also, those CFD or caregiver pages, a really great way to help give them homework, give them ideas for the week. If they're not old enough to participate in their own group, and we'll let people answer, but the truth is there may be babies around, there may be young kids running around during group if families don't have childcare. We just need to be more flexible with who's there. That's where Maria has done things like reading the kissing hand as part of it, so that though that family is engaged in that, using the puppet, maybe you're doing a combination of young children and parents. It's getting creative based on who you have and who's in the home, but we certainly aren't going to be able to have those same rules where kids are in one room and parents are in the other if there are young children. Again, many of you have been in meetings with me where my 3-year-old's running through. So being realistic about that. Having a co-leader. So John and Nikki talked about this. It can be really tempting, I think. And again, this is, as always, we always say this is best case scenario sometimes, but having a co-leader that is, as Rosemary is right now, in the chat room, able to help with technology. I can see some people are saying screen is blurry and that's likely due to your internet connection, which is going to happen to families, and why there's a call-in number. And so, making sure those things are established and practiced ahead of time. It also could be that if people want to be sending a private message to a group leader because something's coming up for them, they could send it to that co-leader and you could let them know that. Our goal in all of our tips and then those best practices that are just out there for virtual groups, because many of us in the behavioral health and substance use disorder field, this is new to us, but lots of fields have been doing virtual things for a long time. So there are learnings out there for us. For celebrating families, it's wanting to create that safe, supportive, and nurturing group environment. And we're seeing people do it in so many different ways. Group duration. Here's what's working for people, and you decide what works for you. Young kids, 30 minutes tops. Preteens and teens, 45 minutes to an hour. And then adults, we've been seeing 90 minutes. What we've heard from people is that they started with an hour and it wasn't long enough. Group leaders are signing on about 15 minutes early and then staying a little bit afterwards, so that if people have questions and there's opportunity for that check-in. And a key here is that we're collaborating with parents in a very different way than we have before. They were always our collaborators because for many of them, one, they needed to show up to make groups successful. Many of them needed to bring their kids to help us make groups successful. They had to be open, with their willingness to try and trust with us was part of our success. In this case, we are asking them actually to do some preparation. So Maria was talking about her handouts. She's taking 3 weeks worth of handouts and mailing those to families. So they have 3 weeks at a time. And she's also color coding the handouts so that she's able to refer to them. At Bridges, the group they all had access to email. So they were able to email them the handouts. We have another site that we've talked to who are actually doing all the handouts for all 16 weeks, or at least the first 8, and sending a binder. And then also dropping off a box they're doing the 0 to 3 for the kids that have some of the materials. And we would also recommend sending families the kissing hand, hopefully in saving money in number of group leaders and in perhaps rental space and in meals. You have a little more wiggle room in your budget to provide a few more supplies to families. For instance, one site is actually providing each family with a puppet. So we're looking to parents as collaborators. So that's also part of that setup. We're also looking for them as collaborators in that if you're running children's groups, that they're able to make sure that their phone is charged or their iPads, tablets charged for when their child is going to do group. Are they able to find a space in the home for their child to be able to do group, or get them headphones if you could help them with that, so that they're creating the space for their children. We aren't. We're creating the content and the virtual space, but they're creating the physical space. So how they're able to do that. Establishing and reviewing group agreements are spell, but I want to show you, one thing I'm trying to demonstrate here is that you can use your computer, you can use slides and share your screen like I am. You can share a Microsoft Word document or a whiteboard if you want to take notes. You can we love flip charts in Celebrating Families. You can use that. You can just write it out on a piece of paper and share with the screen. I've done many trainings where we've been doing a gratitude exercise of who, what, and how, and just showing them this. So knowing also that your group leaders are going to have different levels of comfort with technology. We heard a lot about frequent open-ended questions for your group. One great way is breaking them into virtual groups in different rooms. And again, that's something to look into, and certainly be happy to if you want to email us, be happy to walk you through that. Also journaling. If you wanted to pose a question, give the group, each member, some time to write it down and think about it, and then ask a few people to share. That gives them time to think about it and then share with the group. We have a bit of a section in here on child's online safety. We know that there are predators that are targeting children online, and we want to make sure that for us and for families that there's an awareness of that, and that parents are certainly giving their children space for group, but also that they're being aware of what their kids are logging onto and making sure that it's logging on to us. Letting your group guide you. We kind of always do this, right? That's why there's 6 or 7 activities every week, and we say if you only get to one, it's this one. But letting your group guide you. We're in unprecedented times. There is so much trauma that we and our families are experiencing, not only from, as Rosemary talked about, this disease, this virus that we don't know much about, except that it's really dangerous and it's really impacting our country and our world. Racial injustices, that the conversations and that are going on, and the things that are happening and not happening that may be impacting us. The shelter in place and not being as connected to people that we love. And for those in recovery, perhaps not connected to the groups that were my safe coping skills. And so those triggers and for relapse are even stronger. We know people are at super high risk. And so there may be more processing around those items than we might typically have in group. And we don't want that to completely take over, but it's present. And we know from being trauma informed that the skill building and the knowledge is not going to come through if I'm sitting in fear and in my trauma. So I loved that John and Nikki talked about doing that practice run. And so you make sure everybody can log on and then everybody gets there. And in that practice run, you can kind of do that check-in to see how people are doing and then move forward. And then staying connected. How can people who are in your group get support outside? Is it that they may already be in another one of your programs? Is it that there are open calling hours, or you're giving them a call, or you're texting throughout the week, and that kind of thing? I want to be clear, Sonia, I see your question. And so when Bridges, for instance, is staggering times, it's because families may only have one phone or tablet. So the parent group ends, and then a half hour later, the kids group starts. That ends a half hour later, the teen group starts. That works for the families that they're serving on Saturdays. It may be that you do parent group on Monday night and you do a teen group, because I know, Sonia, you guys had you also had super engaged teens. So maybe Monday night you're doing the parent group, and Thursday late afternoon you're doing the teen group. So our assumption is that we don't have families that could all be in different rooms on different devices in group at the same time. So yes, if you can also just do the parent group, and we'll get to, but then how do you engage the family time, and how do you engage children? So I'm going to review our suggested agendas. You'll see they don't look that much different, although they're abridged. And so for parents and caregivers, that's 75 to 90 minutes. Again, getting on 5-10 minutes early to make sure that you're kind of getting everyone gathered in. I have found in my trainings it to be really successful. Like I asked many of you, that people do a check-in word in the chat room. It helps me know they're here. It helps me know how the group overall is doing. All of you were saying that most people that answered were doing awesome, and so that was helpful for me to know as a group facilitator. Now, we're in webinar mode, so I can't see you. You can see me. With groups, it would be in meeting mode so that everyone can see one another. And that may be another one of the rules that you want to make, is that they have to keep their video on. This is also a time where the kids may be in the room, and so maybe as they're gathering is when you might be reading a story or singing a song or having the puppet check in with everybody as we're checking in. You then move into centering, group agreements every time, and then you're reviewing that homework and follow up. So there's more homework now. We always had it, but we're really checking in about it, because you'll see those family activities, what we normally would come back and do together during family time, becomes the family's homework for the week. And there's been so many fun ways that they've been reporting in on that. Maria mentioned a group participant feedback summary form, and I'm going to make sure you all have access to that, because she's shared it with us, because you may find that helpful. Other ways it's happening: family meal. Have at least one family meal this week, and take a selfie of your family having a meal and text it to the group leader. Or write in your journal one word that describes how it felt for everyone in the family to have dinner this week. Those kinds of things. You then would go into your hour-long activity. For this week, it would be the Healthy Living Circle, and then the activities that we suggest. So again, we pulled the activities that we feel would be the most impactful one, most importantly, to get to that most important concept each week, but also to be able to do virtually. You're then going to assign homework. So you're going to take a little more time to assign homework, because you're going to walk them through what that might look like. Have a family dinner this week. Oh, well, I don't have my kids with me. Okay, well, what could you do this week during your virtual visit with your child? Maybe you could actually read her the kissing hand this week. So talking through to set them up for success of what might they need in order to be able to do that activity. Maybe it's the week on nutrition and it's the find the hidden sugars treasure hunt. You're going to go over that activity with them and say, okay, parents, you know, you're going to either put out some food or have your kids be able to go look through your cupboards and your fridge, and here's how it's going to go. And so you're setting them up to be your co-facilitators because they're going to be facilitating that family time, which we're really curious to see. And actually, when we get to the Q&A, maybe Rosemary can talk. We have some preliminary data from Uplift, from our evaluator, who was able to compare in-person group from virtual group. And we're really excited to see what happens when we kind of elevate that parent or caregiver role a bit and have them really as the teachers of the family activity in partnership with us. And then we end with reflection and serenity saying. Here are the recommended session agendas for children and for adolescents. Again, it's very similar. We're still following the same topic each week, and homework assignments. Here's what you're gonna get in your packet and your guide for each week. So this is an example of session 2. And so we reminded you of the main concept, which is there are 4 parts to healthy living. And I have my healthy living circle. See, I'm well trained by Rosemary and Linda. I can't not have a flip chart. Side note, when I was first trained, there were no slides. Everything was a flip chart. That was, talk about trying to get those things in the car and to the training site. So that's the main concept. And you'll see here, we've got our opening, and then here we have 3 activities for you. Now, as always, there's the most important activity, which is the healthy living circle. But these are the 3 that we think within that 90 minutes would be the most important. But as always, you're going to do what you have time for. And in this week, we made sure the most important activity was in there each week. And you'll see here. So then we move over to the second column, family activities. And so these are the activities that we're asking families to practice throughout the week. Family meal. When they have that family meal, they share with each other, what did they think, what did they add to the healthy living circle? And then they do that connecting with my family activity. What are we already doing? And what are some things as a family, 1 or 2 things we want to start trying out in making their own healthy living circle? And then there is homework for children and adolescents. But if you're only doing parent, this family activity, it could be important. And then they could through the Dear Caregiver page, help children and teens do those other activities through the week. And is another thing that one of our sites is doing, although they're only leading virtual parent groups, when they're sending those handouts to parents, it includes the caregiver pages and it includes the materials they would need to be able to help their kids complete some of these activities. Okay, so I want to just go to, so there was a question about 0 to 3, and I mentioned that one of our residential facilities here in California has started piloting that, and we are working with them. They are doing, they're starting with sort of the parent group section. They're doing the parent group piece of it, and then they're actually taking a break, coming back, and they're doing the family time. So they're doing the parent-child activity. So for them, part of what they're making sure they get a kit to each family that has things like bubbles, like cotton balls, like all the things that one might need to be able to do those activities. And they are in week 4, and it's going really well. They are doing it for a few hours because it's part of their residential treatment. They have some people, actually it's a combination of women in their perinatal program who are residential and some who are coming in outpatient. So we'll have really good information coming for them, but we're also happy to talk to anyone who is hoping to start 0 to 3. I also saw, I'll look for Q&A. I think we answered the one about doing the homework. Yeah, okay. So Rosemary, if you could help me, people can now raise their hands. if they have questions. And then you just need to click on the allow to talk. That will allow people to ask a question. I can actually start. So I'm actually going to start with you, Shala. You can unmute yourself, or I'm asking you to unmute, and you can go ahead and ask your question.
I actually don't have any questions.
Okay. Well, thanks for being here. I saw your hand up, but thanks for being here. Maria Lopez. Do you have a question?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't have any questions right now.
Okay. So if I just called on you, just note your hands up, and that's why I was, so I didn't mean to put you on. How about Bernadette McDonald? Any questions? April Brewer.
Hi, I'm calling from Akron, Ohio, and one of our big concerns with doing this program virtually is that we've seen a number of trauma responses in our young people, and we're trying to figure out how to handle that virtually. Some of their behaviors, we're especially concerned about those middle sessions, 7, 8, 9, 10, where the curriculum is more intensive and is eliciting sometimes some trauma behaviors from the kids. How are we supposed to deal with that when we're not hands-on? We're expecting parents who are not really trained to handle those kind of behaviors.
I hear that. John or Nikki, do you want to talk about your experience? Because you have had that sort of preteen, teen age, and you have done those weeks.
We have, and I wish we had a perfect solution for it, but what we figured out with that was that, first of all, when we started doing the children's groups, we found that there was kind of a double-edged sword with that, in that quite frequently with the children's instructor would notice was that every time they asked the child a question, they would kind of look over their shoulder to see if, you know, if the parent was still kind of there, and when they answered, and there was a little bit of a limitation there. So what we did in the next parent group was did a talk similar to what you had said earlier on this webinar, where we said, you know, listen, we'd love to, you know, obviously you want to keep an eye on your child when they're on the internet, but if you can give them enough space to kind of let them speak, and that sort of loosen them up a little bit, and that type of thing. But I
was just going to say, we actually haven't had that circumstance come up. Actually, we haven't been in any of those heavier groups where it has literally triggered a behavior response to where we would have to work through that, because in person, which I'm sure all the rest of the sites do as well, but we had our clinical director on site to kind of address that kind of stuff, and virtually, clearly we're not in person, but we haven't experienced that yet. That's a great question.
Yeah, and I think part of one of the reasons why we haven't experienced that yet is because the instructors are not pressing them hard when we get to those kind of really tough questions, that they're trying to find that balance between letting them talk if they're willing to, but not pressing them on them. And that might be one of the reasons why we haven't run into that yet.
What's coming to mind for me is it's absolutely a real concern, and comes up with the prep of things, right? So in your intake, you know, are there youth that are really struggling right now because of so many trauma responses? And is being in group with us the right time, or is some individual work better for them right now? It's just as we would in a live group. Also, maybe prepping the parents ahead of time about the topics that are coming up. If they're in any individual work with you, do they have a therapist or a case manager or a peer partner, or as the group leader that can help prep them for that? But it certainly is a challenge that you can't just kind of take a walk with them and help them. And so other ideas certainly are welcome if others have anything to add. April, does that help at all?
It does help some. Our biggest challenge has been in the past with our 4 to 7 year old age group, actually. So we'll definitely have to work through that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, using your best judgment and seeing what support they can get in between. And I think, you know, you bring up a really good point. Our at-risk families are even more at risk right now, right? And our kids don't necessarily have access to their safe circles either. And so keep in touch with us about that, April, if we can be helpful further.
Thank you.
Sandra Cooper, it looks like you might have something to share.
Yeah, actually, I put it in the chat, but I usually, because I have, you know, what I do as the program coordinator is I host the room. So I run the PowerPoint while two co-leads run the session. So all they don't have to worry about paying attention to participants. Then we have facilitators or support that are in there that keeps the eye on staff to watch body language and things like that. And then and if something comes up, I send a support or a co-lead and that participant into a breakout room. That's a feature on Zoom, and that helps out greatly. But my question really also is, how do we attack the feeding them portion? Like, I feel like that we're missing that. Like we can add what money we're missing or what we're not spending in food to their graduation presents, which wouldn't be a big deal. But is there a way that we can, do you have any idea how we can bridge that gap as far as that?
No, because we love it. Well, I'm going to actually ask Antoinette, I'm going to find her, because her group is actually doing a virtual family dinner tonight. And I also think they dropped off gift baskets in the beginning with like some snacks and let's see.
That's a great idea.
Right? Oh, where'd you go, Antoinette? And these guys were just trained. This is their first round. So, Antoinette?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi. So what we did at the beginning, because we didn't want to just stop, kind of just drop our families when we had to stop meeting in person, is we did gather together some gifts, just some things that we thought that they might need being sheltered in place, and along with some goodies. I have a daughter as a baker, so she baked a bunch of goodies for everybody and we delivered those. We've been like tossing around so many different ideas about putting in the food component into that, because I think that's so important. The times that we were able to meet in person, we were able to do the first 2 sessions in person and have family dinner together. And the feedback we got from the families and the facilitators was so good that we were trying to figure out, like, how do we get that back? And so we're getting to the end of our first cycle, and we thought, you know what a way to celebrate is to sit down and have family dinner together. So what we're going to do, and we're all in different places. Our facilitators are from 4 different counties, and our families are 2 from all over the place. So what we're doing is we're providing the family meal for the family themselves, which I'm going to take care of. We're doing this today. So I'm going to deliver that to them. And then we're going to meet virtually on Zoom like we normally would, all together as a family, as we would if we were sitting at the table. The facilitators, of course, are going to provide their own meals this time. We're just providing the family meal. And then we kind of did it, when you want to talk about an agenda, we have the same things for us that we do if we were to come together, like we come together, and for us, our centering really is our opening prayer and welcoming each other. And then we're going to sit down, all of us at our kitchen tables, and we're going to have dinner and conversation. And so today, the little notes that we had put on our agenda, we're going to, talk about how people's day and how things have been going on, whatever they also want to talk about. But also the focus is around nutrition. So like, we're going to talk, like the family had chose, like they really wanted pizza. So we're going to have pizza, but we're going to talk about what's nutritious and what's not, and how to make some of those meals at home. We're also going to play some games. And so amongst those games, it's a game called Me Too, which is kind of like I Love My Neighbor Who. If you haven't played it, it's really fun. but we can transition those games and those activities that we would do in person virtually. And then we're also going to do a scavenger hunt. And then of course we have what I guess could be called a raffle, but nobody has to pay for the tickets. We're going to have a drawing. We made some abalone and glass necklaces that we're going to give away to all those that participate. So kind of making it a fun event. And I think that after they taste this family dinner, like they're going to want to do it every week, which I don't know that we can do, but because it's a lot of work. But I think that it's a lot easier. It's been daunting, but I think it's going to be a lot easier than we had expected. And I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate into our next session. Like maybe a family dinner once a month would be reasonable.
Yeah.
So,
Antoinette, I so appreciate you sharing, and those are so many good ideas. Antoinette and Bonnie are on here. They're from the Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians, Northern California, pretty rural little town called Willits. And so lots of the challenges that many of our families in rural communities have. And then, you know, there's that added cultural lens from the Native American community. And like I said, this is their first round. They were just trained in December. So, and so nothing like COVID for your first round when you've got a grant from the state. But I appreciate that. So great ideas. Maybe it's not possible every time, but maybe it's possible once a month or every 6 weeks. Could it be that you give out a few recipes and they all make that dinner and then bring it, you know, eat together virtually? Could be a great idea too. I love the question though, because it is such a big piece of how we serve and nurture as part of celebrating families. I also love, Antoinette, that you mentioned you have some, you know, topics, so you have questions, you have activities, and so you're also modeling things they can do for family dinner, and hopefully they love it so much that initially who wouldn't love someone delivering pizza to their door for them, but eventually they create that for their own families. Really appreciate you. I see a question here about what about parents that don't have access to their children? So that's many of the families that we serve, and certainly Maria in her program, and I'm sure Bridges too, that they're working with families who are involved in the drug courts. And so similar to any other time this happens in our live groups, when we do our intake, we talk to them about the program. We tell them what they'll be learning so that we assure that they're comfortable with that. But then the homework that they have, if they're having many, and again, it depends on your court system and what's happening, but many are having virtual visits with their kids. And if that's happening, what can we provide to them? Can we provide a puppet? Can we provide the kissing handbook? Can we provide just the Dear Caregiver pages to be able to help them with a dialogue that they could do an activity with their children virtually? So if the kids can't be present, just like always, the parents still can be and use those skills when they are able to be with their children. Other questions? Oh, Mary Beth, I think your hand is up. Mary Beth? Oh, maybe not. I don't think I see any other hands. Let me check that in our Q&A. Nikki and John, anything else that you would add that we haven't covered?
Just that if your platform does offer the breakout groups, like one of the things that I think somebody mentioned in the chat, but what we really found with that was that when you break the families into rooms, or the parents into rooms, that what we had was a breakout lead who was going to be familiar with, they may not be an expert in celebrating families, but they know what the subject matter is going to be, and they can kind of help them keep on track. And I don't, somebody in the Q&A had asked about how we would know people were going to come back together. If you are using the Zoom platform, when you set up the group rooms, you can set a time for them to close and send out a message to all of the break rooms to let them know. What I do is I say, okay, we've got 3 minutes left, so start to wrap it up. And you can just send out a message to them, and then they are notified. that within a minute it's going to close, and then if they don't do anything, then everybody comes back together automatically. So
yeah, and again, we're not being paid by Zoom.
right.
But and I don't know if Microsoft Teams or WebEx have the function, and we heard about it earlier too. This idea that as the clinical, as the coordinator or supervisor, that you can go to the different breakout rooms, and it's so easy. I said it's actually easier to break out people in Zoom than it is to count off in a training and so you could check in, and of course, just like we would in a live group, we would let the participants know that first.
Right.
That first group, here's Melissa. I'm not your group leader, but I'm part of the team, and I'll be checking in with popping into your groups just to see how things are going, and I'll be available to check in with you if you have any questions or anything comes up to you. So we want to make sure that you were doing that same introduction.
Absolutely.
No, I don't have anything. Just in regards to maybe the kids that are unable to be there, I absolutely agree. I know that for Sacramento County, the judicial system has, when they're, not the judicial system, if a child is unable or not in the home with the parent, that at some point, if there's like a social worker involved or whoever's maybe that middle person, having a conversation, Melissa, similar to what you were mentioning as well, with allowing the child to just get on that virtual, because a lot of them are doing the virtual visits right now. And so if they're able to coordinate that with the foster mom or the caregiver or wherever the child is, they're still possibly getting that opportunity to, you know, have their child learning the same thing they're learning while they're in their group. The adult parent is learning what they're learning. So that maybe at the next virtual visit, they can kind of check in and, you know, talk about it. But other than that, no.
Yeah. Great. Well, and I'm seeing, Angie, thanks for letting us know that Messenger and WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is there's lots of technology out there. Most of our families have cell phones. We've even been able, I know in our agency, to be able to use some funds to purchase them for, I think they call them Obama phones. I'm sure there's a more technical, appropriate term for it, but I like Obama, so I can call it that. Thanks to him. That we can provide phones for them. But the WhatsApp is a great way to have a dialogue going amongst your group members. So reminder, there's group tonight, or halfway through the week, hey, who's done family dinner? Or how'd the conversation go about hidden sugars? So they're using technology to stay, and the Remind app, oh, I need to learn about that one, I guess. So keep those ideas coming in the apps, because I do think we've been talking about it, and I'm sure you all have in your organizations, that this pandemic put us into a place that we never thought we'd be. We certainly, as an agency, were starting telehealth with our psychiatrists, but it was nowhere near as big as it was today. And within 48 hours, had transitioned our entire workforce. And so we know that coming out of this, we are going to have a hybrid of different ways to be able to reach families. John, you mentioned transportation being an issue, and now we know this, we can do this virtually, and so maybe that's not an issue anymore. Trainings, Nicole was working on virtual training, and these are going to give us tools that maybe would have taken us a little longer to figure out about, because we're kind of being forced to, because of the passion we all have. Rosemary, I'm going to invite you, before I, go ahead, Rosemary, actually. Why don't you?
Okay, I think you need
You're here. You muted yourself now.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, good.
I have not done this online before. First, I wanted to say I've been rather quiet, except for answering chat questions, mainly because I wanted to let the people that have been doing this speak, and the wisdom that's coming from John and Nikki and Kayla that works with them, and Maria, and we haven't used Tony's name, but Tony's been working with Maria. I wanted the folks that have been our pilot sites on this to really carry the conversation on this. On the other hand, I wanted to really reinforce the document that Melissa showed there. I did interview about 4 or 5 sites that have gone online with their groups, and that is a condensation of the wisdom I've learned from those different people. And that will be available on the Facebook page. It will be available on the Prevention Partnership page. Whatever your name is, Melissa. Melissa will send it out by email to those of you that have registered. But we've tried to put some ideas together. On the next step, though, is we need to hear back from you, because we'll need to update that and learn as you go forward. So please stay in conversation with us. And then the other thing I just wanted to quickly mention is we are delighted that we're working with Dr. Cohen from San Jose State University that actually has a grant from the university to work with us for 5 years. So we've been able to do some evaluation. He very quickly looked at outcomes from Uplift, comparing the in-person groups that they have been having to the groups that went online about the 2nd or 3rd week. What was interesting was that all the evaluations stayed very high. Those of you who have trained with me know we talk about effect size, which is a very large statistical significance. All of that remained. I mean, the groups work, they really work. But what was intriguing is the parenting skills almost doubled in their effectiveness when we went online. And my personal belief is because instead of practicing them in our offices and in our buildings, they're having to practice them at home. We really don't know why it works so well, but that was the surprise. And I know Maria's talked about that with me when I've talked with her, that the families are really doing this at home. The caregiver pages help a lot. I know some folks didn't even know we had them for every age group. We do. So do look at your curriculum and do connect back with Mary Beth and Nakoa if for some reason you don't have those right now, because we have written them for every single age group. They were particularly thought when we created them, they were at a request of social services for children that were with their foster parents. So the foster parents would know what had happened that week and some of the trauma that might come up during those core sessions in the middle could be better addressed. But we do have those, and they do really have family activities in those as well. So lots of ideas there. Just wanted to say hello and say I've really been here, but the wisdom is coming from each of you to the others there, and wanted to honor that. So thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary. Another question, Melissa Armstrong. Hi, Melissa. I can see your smile from here. Registration. So people are doing it a little differently, I know, for Maria. They have their coordinator doing them on phone individually. They're actually mailing the intake packet to the family so that they have it in front of them, and they're going through the questions together. And that's how they're doing it. John, you want to just maybe reiterate, you're doing a 2-part registration.
That is correct. Yeah, they are talking to our coordinator and setting everything up and going through the paperwork that they normally would do for the in-person. But then when they go to do the electronic sign up, they go ahead and register ahead of time, mostly so that we make sure that they're in touch with that. But then that's when we can ask them the specific questions about providing their safe space and all of that kind of thing. And yeah, that could also be done with the in-person as well. But what we find is that another thing, and I know this is Zoom specific, but another thing that registration allows us to do is if we do poll questions, that we're able to do reports from those, so that we can use the poll feature, and that's a Zoom thing. But that's another reason we use registration as well. Right.
Melissa, I see that you're asking about the electronic portion, and so I'm not quite sure. I don't, what you might be referring to is a telehealth consent, maybe?
Oh, yeah.
I know that as organizations, we've had to create telehealth consents. Every state is probably different, but for ours, they allowed verbal consent as long as that was in the signature box, and that had to be in a progress note, all of those good things. So I don't know if that's what you're meaning around the electronic piece. but let me know. And I'm also happy to connect with you one-on-one if that's helpful.
Also, our county developed one of those for us as well. So you might also check in with them, especially if your folks are in treatment in your county. You might check with your county to see if they have something like that.
Got it. I think that what we're seeing for registration is that most people, that they're doing it by phone. So it's actually a phone call. But you could certainly do Zoom. I wouldn't recommend email. Certainly you could email the packet if they have access to that, or email a consent, or of course mail it so they have a hard copy. But I think I would recommend that you start with a phone call to ensure that they can get hooked up with all those things. If it's an existing client in a program and they're already used to doing Zoom, you could certainly do it that way. Hopefully that answers your question, Melissa. Okay, I'm just making sure. Oh, here we go. Oh, that helps. Okay, good. Facebook page is Celebrating Families. And so here you have, here's our website. Certainly, so a couple things to note. As I mentioned, we're going to be emailing this out, and we'll also be emailing out the link to the video. So for those of your staff that weren't able to get on, again, I apologize. I'm just modeling that something always goes wrong virtually, right? Mary Gardner, you told me that that would happen yesterday. So I apologize that some of them couldn't get on, but we will be recording and sending, and certainly feel free to follow up with us or NACOA. My email address is there. We have really we're so grateful to the Office of Child Abuse Prevention here at the state of California, who has given us, actually has extended a year, so now a 3-year grant to be able to expand the number of sites that Celebrating Families is being offered at. And what we're able to produce for here in California, we're sharing with all of you. And so as part of that grant, I have monthly technical assistance and coaching calls with the sites. Once a quarter, we're going to open those dialogues up to anyone. So stay tuned for those, because we want to be sharing information and really creating platforms for you to all be sharing with one another, because you're already coming up with amazing ideas to bring this to families in meaningful ways. The Facebook page is Celebrating Families. Okay, well, 3 minutes early. I don't know that I've ever done that. Let me make sure there's no more hands. All right, thank you all for your time. Please reach out to us, stay in touch with us, and we will do the same for you. And please remember to take care of yourselves, because we cannot take care of others if our own cup is empty. So keep that time for centering and mindfulness and self-care until we see you again. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Everyone. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Nikki. Thanks, Rosemary.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Rosemary.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Sending you love. Sending you love.